Hello, lovelies. This is Imade Africa Stories. Today's story is about love that never really ended, just got buried under lies and silence. A mother, a father, and a child caught in the middle of a truth no one was ready for. Stay with this to the end because one hospital moment changes everything. Now, let's begin.
Rain fell on Soul like a punishment. Please. Somebody help him. Please. Grace Bello burst through the emergency entrance of Hansung Medical Center with her 6-year-old son limp in her arms, his small body soaked through, his lips the color of winter sky. The automatic doors hadn't even finished sliding open before she was screaming, her voice tearing through the fluorescent quiet of the air like something that had been waiting years to escape. He stopped breathing in the car, his heart. Please, someone. Nurses descended immediately. A gurney appeared from nowhere. Grace laid Daniel down with trembling hands, her fingers refusing to let go of his shirt even as the medical team moved around her with practiced urgency. Ma'am, step back. He has a heart condition. Congenital. He's had 2 episodes before but never like this. What medications? Everything is in the file, Hansung Children's Cardiac Unit. Daniel Bello, please just. A monitor was attached. Numbers flashed. A nurse's face tightened in a way that sent ice through Grace's chest. Get Dr. Seo Ji-hoon. Now. Grace stopped breathing. That name. Her entire body went rigid, hands still outstretched toward her son. The world narrowing to a single point of terror that had nothing to do with Daniel's heart and everything to do with it. Not him. God, not him. Anyone in this hospital. Anyone in this city. Anyone but him. She didn't have time to think beyond that prayer because the corridor doors swung open and the man walked in. He hadn't changed. That was the cruelest thing. 7 years had passed and Dr. Seo Ji-hoon still moved through a room the way he always had, like the room had been built around him, like gravity itself made small adjustments in his presence. Tall, broad-shouldered, still wearing that expression of controlled authority that she had once spent entire evenings trying to soften. His white coat was spotless. His hands, the hands that had held her face, were already pulling on surgical gloves. He was looking at the chart when he glanced up, and the world stopped. 7 years collapsed into nothing. Grace watched his face do something she had never seen it do in all the time she'd known him. Go completely, absolutely blank. Not cold. Not angry. Blank, the way a person looks when their mind simply refuses to process what their eyes are showing them. Grace. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Daniel convulsed. The entire team surged forward. Monitors screamed. A nurse shouted readings that Grace couldn't parse because the blood had left her head and she was grabbing the wall to stay upright in Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon was still looking at her, frozen in the middle of the chaos like a statue while her son died 3 feet away from him. He needs surgery. Doctor, the boy needs surgery now. Ji-hoon looked at Daniel, then back at Grace. Then he said very quietly, no. The emergency room went silent in a way that shouldn't have been possible with monitors alarming and staff moving and rain hammering the windows. What? The attending nurse whispered. I will not take this case. He set the chart down, began removing his gloves. Assign it to Dr. Park. Dr. Park is in a 7-hour surgery. Then find someone else. Grace took 1 step forward. Ji-hoon. Do not. His voice was soft and absolute and devastating. Do not say my name. Why would Korea's best pediatric surgeon let a dying child suffer because of a woman he once loved? If you're new here, this is Imade's Afro Case Stories, where every story hits different. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. The staff erupted. 2 senior nurses surrounded Ji-hoon with the barely contained fury of people who had dedicated their lives to saving others watching someone refuse to do the same. The attending physician grabbed his arm. Voices overlapped, urgent and horrified, the word dying used 3 times in 40 seconds. Ji-hoon did not move. Grace fell to her knees. She didn't plan to. Her legs simply gave way, hitting the cold hospital floor, and she looked up at the man she had once loved with every part of herself and she said, please, I am begging you. Whatever I did to you, whatever you think happened, he is 6 years old. He is innocent. Please. Ji-hoon looked down at her. Something moved across his face. Something she couldn't name. Then it was gone, locked behind 7 years of practice discipline, and he turned away. She understood then, in the way you understand things that break you, that he genuinely intended to walk out. She had known this moment would come. She had imagined it 10,000 times over 6 years, rehearsed it, dreaded it, built walls around herself against it. She had never imagined it would happen here, with Daniel's heart failing and her knees on a hospital floor and Ji-hoon's back already turned. She had also never imagined what he would do next. He had reached the corridor doors when the charge nurse thrust Daniel's file into his path. "Dr. Seo, you are required to at least review the case. Legally. Sign off and we will find another surgeon, but you must review it first." Ji-hoon took the file. He flipped it open without looking, his pen already moving toward the signature line. Then he stopped. The pen hovered. His eyes dropped to the patient information section. The section Grace had filled out 6 years ago at Daniel's first cardiac appointment, 3 months after she'd arrived in Seoul with nothing but a borrowed suitcase and a secret she didn't know how to carry. Patient name: Daniel Seo Bello. Ji-hoon read it once. Read it again. Grace watched his shoulders change. He turned very slowly. His face was doing that thing again, that impossible blankness, but underneath it something was cracking. She could see it. She had always been able to read him, even when he thought he was unreadable. "Seo," he said. The word came out strange, careful, like he was testing its weight. "His name is Seo." Grace said nothing. She was still on the floor. She couldn't tell if she was breathing. "Why does your son have my surname?" The silence stretched. Daniel's monitor screamed a sustained alarm. Ji-hoon dropped the file and ran. They prepped Daniel in 4 minutes. Grace stood outside the operating room window with her hands pressed flat against the glass and watched Ji-hoon become a different person. Or maybe the same person he had always been underneath everything, the one she had fallen in love with before the surgeries and the fame and the family expectations had buried him. He was precise, relentless. He moved around the table with an intensity that the other surgeons seemed to orbit like moons around a sun, anticipating, adjusting, never once breaking the thread of focus that connected his hands to Daniel's small, failing heart. Grace let herself breathe for the first time in 2 hours. She had loved Ji-hoon in the way you only love someone when you are young enough to believe that love is sufficient, that it can survive anything including other people's cruelty and ambition. She had been 20 years old when they met at a medical conference where she'd been working registration, and he'd been presenting preliminary research on pediatric cardiac repair. He had stopped at her table to fill out paperwork and asked her opinion on something. She couldn't even remember what, some small logistical question, and then kept standing there talking for 40 minutes after the paperwork was done. She had been 23 when she disappeared from his life. 3 years of loving someone completely, followed by a single morning in which everything ended. No conversation. No goodbye. Just Grace packing what she could carry and walking out of Seoul, out of the life she'd been building, out of the future she'd mapped in careful detail every night before sleep. She had told herself it was the only way. For 3 years she had almost believed it. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Ji-hoon came out of the operating room and found Grace in the corridor, still standing, still wrapped in the same wet clothes she'd arrived in, her hair beginning to dry into wild curls around her face. She looked exactly the way she always had when she was trying to hold herself together. Chin up, jaw tight, hands folded in front of her like she was in church. "He's stable," Ji-hoon said. Grace made a sound he would never be able to describe to anyone. Came from somewhere below language. The defect was more advanced than his previous imaging showed. "He'll need a follow-up procedure in 6 to 8 weeks, but the immediate danger has passed." Ji-hoon paused. His voice was completely professional, completely controlled. "He's asking for you." Grace moved past him. He caught her arm. Not hard. Just there. His hand on her arm the way it used to be, automatic and certain. "We are not finished," he said quietly. "I know." She didn't look at him. "Let me see my son first." He released her. Daniel was tiny against the hospital bed. White blankets. Pale face. And 4 in his small arm and monitors soft beeping around him and his eyes, when they opened, enormous and dark and immediately searching. "Mom! I'm here." Grace sat on the edge of the bed and gathered his hands in both of hers, and let herself cry finally, quietly, where Ji-hoon couldn't see her. "I'm right here, baby. My chest hurts." "I know. The doctor fixed it." Daniel processed this with the solemn gravity that had always made him seem older than 6. He had been born serious. He had been born watching the world with those enormous eyes as if taking careful notes. The tall doctor? The one outside. Grace went still. He held my hand, Daniel said. Before I went to sleep. I was scared and he held my hand and told me I was going to be okay. He paused. He didn't smile but his eyes were nice. Grace pressed her lips together. He looked at me like he knew me, Daniel said. Then losing interest in the mystery in the way only a child can. Mom, can I have juice? 3 days passed. Ji-hoon reviewed Daniel's case every morning. He told himself it was standard protocol. He told himself it was professional diligence. He told himself many things while standing outside room 412 at 7 a.m. watching a 6-year-old boy eat hospital oatmeal with enormous enthusiasm and explained to the nursing staff exactly why the heart was the most important organ in the body. It pumps blood, Daniel informed Nurse Cho on the second morning, holding up a spoon for emphasis. All the other organs are just there. The heart is actually doing something. Nurse Cho, a 40-year-old woman who had seen everything, looked charmed in spite of herself. And how do you know that? I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. A heart doctor. Like my mom studied nursing. Pause. Well, she had to stop. But she knows everything. She sounds impressive. She's the best person. Daniel said it with complete simplicity, the way children state facts they haven't yet learned to complicate. She's the best person in the world and when I'm a doctor I'm going to take care of her. Ji-hoon, standing in the corridor with Daniel's chart open in his hands, did not move for a long moment. The boy's eyes, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking, the absolute certainty in his voice when he made a statement, the refusal to qualify or soften what he believed to be true. Ji-hoon had seen those things in exactly one other face his entire life. Every morning he reviewed the chart and told himself he was being irrational. That Seo was not an uncommon surname. That Grace had spent years in Seoul, and could have taken the name for any number of reasons. That the timeline, while suggestive, was circumstantial. That he needed evidence, not instinct. Every morning, Daniel tilted his head exactly the way Ji-hoon's younger brother tilted his, and Ji-hoon's carefully maintained certainty developed another fracture. On the 4th morning, he ordered a blood panel he had no medical justification for, and stood in the hospital genetics lab watching the technician prepare the samples and told himself he was being thorough. He was not being thorough. He was terrified. Grace knew the moment Ji-hoon figured it out. She had always known she would be able to read the moment. She had been watching for it for 6 years, dreading it while simultaneously, somewhere beneath everything, waiting for it. He came into the room on the 5th day with Daniel's chart, and a different quality of silence around him. Not the careful professional distance he'd maintained since that first night. Something older and rawer. Something that looked, if she was honest, a great deal like the face he'd made the morning she hadn't been there when he woke up. Daniel was asleep. Ji-hoon sat down across from her without asking. Tell me about his father, he said. No, Grace. Daniel's father is not a conversation I'm having with you in a hospital room. Then tell me where. Tell me when. He was quiet for a moment. The monitors beeped softly. Tell me why his file says Seo. Grace looked at the wall above Daniel's head. His middle name, she said finally. I gave him your surname as his middle name. It's not on his Korean registration. Just his Nigerian documents. Ji-hoon went very still. I didn't want him to have nothing of you, she said. I knew he couldn't have you. But I wanted him to have something. She paused. That was stupid. I see that now. I didn't think. I never imagined you would see it. Grace. His voice had changed. Look at me. She didn't. Look at me and tell me Daniel is not my son. The silence lasted 10 seconds. 15. She did not look at him. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had fundamentally rearranged behind them. Some load-bearing wall that had been holding up the structure of his anger had quietly collapsed. How could you? He said, barely above a whisper. How could you take him from me? 6 years, Grace. 6 years of his life that I had reasons. What reasons? What possible? I had reasons. Her voice didn't break. She had learned over 6 years alone, exactly how to not break when she needed to hold something together. I cannot explain them right now and I am asking you not to do this here. Not in front of him. Ji-hoon looked at Daniel. The boy was sleeping with his mouth slightly open and one small hand curled on the pillow beside his face, and his eyelashes, Ji-hoon's eyelashes, the distinctive double fold, the exact curve, resting on his cheeks. Ji-hoon stood abruptly, set the chart down, walked out. He did not come back until the following morning. He came back because Daniel asked for him. The boy had woken up at 6 a.m. and told Nurse Cho he wanted to talk to the tall doctor about heart surgery. And Nurse Cho, who had been watching this situation develop with the avid attention of someone with excellent instincts and no appropriate outlet for them, had paged Ji-hoon before Grace was fully awake. By the time Grace opened her eyes from the chair where she'd been sleeping, Ji-hoon was already seated at Daniel's bedside with a diagram of the human heart drawn on the back of a prescription pad. This part is called the left ventricle, Ji-hoon was explaining. He spoke to Daniel the way Grace had always loved. Like the person across from him was worth the full weight of his attention regardless of their age or status. It's the strongest part. It does the most work. Is that the part you fixed? Part of it. Daniel studied the diagram with his chin in his hands, elbows on his knees. When I'm a surgeon, I want to do hearts. Is it hard? Very. But you learned. I spent 12 years learning. 12 years. Daniel considered this seriously. That's a lot. I'm 6. So I only have to wait 6 more years. Ji-hoon looked at the boy. Grace watched Ji-hoon's face do something she hadn't seen in 7 years, soften. Completely and without armor, the way it only ever softened when he encountered something that genuinely moved him. And he was someone who didn't move easily. You'll have to study very hard, Ji-hoon said. I know. My mom says the best things require the hardest work. Daniel tilted his head. That tilt. She says that's not bad news, that's just the price. Ji-hoon looked at Grace. She looked back at him. She's right, Ji-hoon said quietly. What happened next no one could have predicted, though later Grace would think that it was exactly the kind of thing Daniel had always done. Walk directly toward the center of things with the unself-conscious courage of someone who hadn't yet learned that some truths are too large to simply say aloud. Are you my dad? Ji-hoon stopped breathing. Grace came out of the chair. Daniel was looking at Ji-hoon with those enormous, careful eyes, his diagram of the heart still held in both hands, his expression one of genuine and uncomplicated inquiry. Mom says heroes save people, Daniel continued into the absolute silence. And you saved me. And you look at me like, he paused, searching for words. Like how I look at pictures of my mom when she was young. Like you're looking for something. The room was so quiet that the rain on the window was the loudest thing in it. Ji-hoon turned to Grace. The question on his face did not need words. Grace's lips parted. Before she could speak, Daniel's monitor spiked a single sharp alarm. A brief arrhythmia, nothing dangerous, the kind of warning signal he'd had a dozen times. But it broke the moment like glass, and suddenly there were nurses and Ji-hoon was in doctor mode and Grace was pressing herself against the wall while the team moved around her son. And the question hung in the air unanswered like smoke. Ji-hoon demanded the conversation that evening in his office. Grace sat across from his desk in a chair that felt designed to make patients feel small and told him everything. Not all at once. Not smoothly. In the halting, non-linear way that real confessions happen, circling the worst parts before landing on them, doubling back when her voice failed. She told him about the morning his mother had come to her apartment, the 2 men who had accompanied her, the envelope of documents that made clear, in detailed and credible terms, exactly what Madame Seo was prepared to do to Grace's family in Nigeria if Grace did not remove herself from her son's life. She said I was a distraction. A phase. Grace's hands were flat on her knees, pressing down. She said you were on the verge of your first major hospital appointment, and that a foreign girlfriend with no family connections and no Korean would end your career before it began. She said the medical community was watching you. Pause. She also said that if I was foolish enough to tell you she'd visited, she would ensure my nursing certification applications were denied across every hospital in Lagos. Ji-hoon was so still he barely appeared to be breathing. I was 23, Grace said. I had no money. No leverage. I didn't have Korean citizenship. I didn't have anything except you, and she knew that. She knew the only card I held was you, and she told me that loving you was the worst thing I could do to you. She looked at him directly. And I believed her. Because it was the kind of lie that had enough truth in it. You were pregnant, Ji-hoon said. I found out 3 weeks later. And you still didn't. What would I have said, Ji-hoon? Come back and expose you to everything she'd threatened? Bring a baby into a situation where your mother had already made it clear she'd weaponize anything I gave her. Her voice was steady. She had rehearsed this. She had rehearsed this in the dark for 6 years. I made a choice. I know it was the wrong choice. I have known it was the wrong choice every day for 6 years. But I made it because I was young and alone and terrified, and I thought. She stopped. You thought what? I thought it was what love required. She said it simply. I thought loving you meant protecting you even from me. Ji-hoon pushed back from his desk and stood at the window with his back to her for a long time. When he turned around, his face was wet. She told me you left for someone else, he said. She said there had been another man. She had letters. Things that looked like your handwriting. Grace closed her eyes. I spent 2 years in therapy, Ji-hoon said. Learning how to stop looking for you. Learning how to be angry instead of broken. I became the surgeon I am because I had nothing else. Because you were supposed to be, and I had nothing else. I know. You don't know. You had Daniel. I had. He stopped. Put a hand over his mouth briefly. Recovered. I need to confirm it. Formally. Before we discuss anything further. I need it confirmed and documented. I understand. A DNA test. Whatever you need. He nodded once. Precisely. Then. Does he know anything? About me? He knows he has a father who didn't know about him. I never told him you abandoned him. I never told him anything ugly. She paused. He knows you exist. He asked about you when he was 4. I told him the truth, that it was complicated and that it wasn't his fault and that you would have loved him if you'd known. Ji-hoon looked at the wall above her head. I told him, Grace said quietly, that his father was a good man. The DNA results came back in 5 days. Ji-hoon held the envelope for a long time before he opened it. He was standing in his office at 6:15 in the morning, the city still gray outside his window, and he was aware, in the way he was aware of his own heartbeat, that the paper inside this envelope was going to restructure his entire life regardless of what it said. He opened it. He read it twice. Then he sat down very slowly. Probability of paternity, 0.000%. Conclusion. The tested male, Seo Ji-hoon, is excluded as the biological father of the child, Daniel Seo Bello. He found Grace in the hospital chapel. She was sitting in the back row with her head bent, and when he walked in she looked up and read his face, and her own face went through 5 expressions in 2 seconds. What's wrong? He set the results in front of her without speaking. She read them. Then she read them again. Then she looked at him with an expression that would have been almost funny in a different universe. Pure, unguarded bewilderment. That's impossible, she said. Grace. Ji-hoon. She stood up. That is impossible. You are Daniel's father. You are the only person I have ever. She stopped, drew a breath. I don't understand this. I don't understand what this says. It says I'm not his father. Then it's wrong. DNA tests don't. This one is wrong. Her voice was shaking. Not with guilt. He knew what her guilt looked like. He had spent 48 hours watching it. But with the particular shaking of someone who has been told something that doesn't fit the shape of reality as they know it. I don't know how or why, but these results are wrong. Ji-hoon, look at him. Look at him and tell me you don't see yourself. He didn't say anything. Someone tampered with this, she said. I don't know who or how, but someone. Who would do that? She stopped. A name rose in both their minds simultaneously. Neither said it. The missing employee was named Mr. Cha. He had worked in the Hansung Genetics Lab for 11 years, the last 3 of which, Ji-hoon would later discover, had included regular deposits to a secondary account from a holding company registered to the Seo Family Trust. Mr. Cha had not shown up for his shift the morning after the DNA results were delivered. Ji-hoon found out because a different lab technician, covering Mr. Cha's absence, flagged an irregularity in the sample chain of custody for Daniel Bello's case. A 15-minute gap during which the samples had been logged out and returned under a different technician's ID. Ji-hoon ordered a second test immediately, from an independent lab with no hospital affiliation. He did not tell his mother. He also, for the first time since he had reached adulthood, did not take her call. While they waited for results, something quiet happened. Daniel was recovering. His color came back. His appetite returned with a vengeance that alarmed Nurse Cho and delighted everyone else. He graduated from bed rest to supervised walking, and Ji-hoon, with the full self-awareness of a man who knew exactly what he was doing and had temporarily suspended his ability to care, began ending his morning rounds at room 412. They talked about hearts, about surgery, about whether the cafeteria gelatin counted as a real food. Daniel, who had never met a silence he felt obligated to fill, asked questions with the precision of someone filing away information for future reference, and Ji-hoon answered all of them without the careful simplification most adults defaulted to with children. "You treat me like a real person," Daniel observed on the 6th day. "You are a real person. Most doctors talk to my mom instead of me." Daniel considered this. "Even though I'm the one who's sick. That's poor technique." Daniel grinned. It was the first time Ji-hoon had seen it, a full, unguarded grin, bright as something caught in sunlight, and it stopped him mid-sentence. Because it was his grin. Exactly his grin. The one his younger sister had always said could power a building. "Dr. Seo?" Daniel was looking at him curiously. "Sorry." Ji-hoon cleared his throat. "I was thinking. My mom does that. Gets lost in her head." A pause. "She does it more since we came to this hospital." "Does she?" "She looks at you when you're not watching." Daniel said it with the unencumbered observation of a child reporting a weather pattern. "She looks at you like she's checking if you're real." Ji-hoon said carefully, "And what do you think that means?" "I think she missed you." Daniel returned to his diagram. "I think she missed you for a long time, and she doesn't know what to do about it now that you're here." He looked up with those old eyes. "Do you miss her?" Ji-hoon looked at the door where Grace had gone 20 minutes ago to take a phone call. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think I have been missing her for a very long time." He found her in the hospital chapel again. She had fallen asleep in the back row, her head against the wooden pew, her hands open in her lap in the relaxed way hands only fall when someone has completely surrendered to exhaustion. He stood at the entrance for a moment and then did something that surprised him, sat down beside her quietly and waited. When she woke up, it was to find his jacket draped around her shoulders and Ji-hoon on the other end of the pew with his eyes closed and his head back, not asleep, but still in the way he got still when he was thinking through something he didn't yet have words for. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. They stayed that way for a long time with the chapel quiet around them and the hospital moving outside the door. And Grace thought about how strange it was that the most peaceful she'd felt in 6 years was in a hospital pew next to the man whose heart she had broken, whose son she had hidden, who had every reason to hate her and was instead sitting 6 inches away and breathing. "I don't hate you," he said without opening his eyes. "I want you to know that. I am angry. I am very angry. But it is not at you. You were angry at me in the ER. I was in shock in the ER." A pause. "I am now angry at the correct person." Grace pulled his jacket tighter around her. "Ji-hoon, don't apologize again. You've apologized enough." He opened his eyes, looked at the simple wooden cross at the front of the chapel. "Tell me what you want to happen now. Not what you think I want. What you want." She thought about it honestly. "I want Daniel to know you," she said. "That's what I want. Whatever happens between us, whatever you decide, I want him to know his father." "And between us?" The question settled into the space between them. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't know if you can forgive me enough for there to be in US. And I won't ask you to." She paused. "But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I made the choice I made from love, wrongly, stupidly, but from love, and I have paid for it every morning for 6 years and I would not, even now, even knowing how it turned out, I couldn't have stayed knowing what she would have done to your future." Ji-hoon was quiet for a long moment. "She didn't deserve that power over you," he said finally. "No, she didn't. She won't have it again." Grace turned to look at him. His face was set in an expression she recognized, the one that meant a decision had been reached irrevocably, in the deep and private part of him that didn't negotiate. The second DNA results arrived on a Thursday. Ji-hoon was in surgery when they came. Grace received the call in the corridor outside room 412, standing with her back against the wall and her phone pressed to her ear, and she closed her eyes when she heard the words. She was still standing there when Ji-hoon came out of the OR 30 minutes later, still in scrubs, and she held the paper out to him without speaking. Probability of paternity: 99.97%. Conclusion: Seo Ji-hoon cannot be excluded as the biological father of Daniel Seo Bello. Ji-hoon read it. The ore had left him wrung out, methodical, surgeries always did, and he had been expecting this result for days. He had been certain in his body, in the particular way certainty arrives before evidence. From the moment he'd seen Daniel tilt his head, the paper simply confirmed what he already knew. And yet, he sat down on the floor of the hospital corridor, back against the wall, and put his face in his hands. Grace sat down next to him, not touching, just there. After a while he said, 6 years. Yes. His first word. His first step. Every birthday. Yes. I missed all of it. I know. He lifted his head. His eyes were red. Tell me one thing he did. One thing from when he was small. Grace was quiet for a moment, searching. When he was 2, she said. He decided that good night meant something had to be resolved. You couldn't just say good night. You had to answer a question first. Every night he'd ask something, sometimes small, sometimes enormous. Why is the sky dark? Where do dogs go when they dream? Do cars have feelings? She smiled slightly. I had to have an answer ready. Every night. For 8 months. Jihoon was watching her face. What did he ask on the last night? Jihoon said. He asked if his dad knew he existed. Grace kept her voice even. I said yes. I said his dad knew exactly who he was. I couldn't say the whole truth. But I didn't want him to feel unknown. Jihoon reached out, took her hand, said nothing. They sat on the hospital floor with their backs against the wall and the fluorescent lights overhead and 6 years of loss between them. And Grace let him hold her hand because there was nothing else either of them had that was sufficient, and sometimes the only response to an enormous grief is a small, solid human gesture. The security footage was reviewed by hospital administration the following morning. It showed Mr. Cha exiting the genetics lab at 11:43 p.m. on a Wednesday, 20 minutes before the samples had been returned, carrying a small case. It showed, more importantly, a phone call logged in the hospital security records. A call made from the administration wing at 10:50 p.m. that same night, from an extension registered to the office of the Seo Family Foundation's hospital liaison. The liaison was a woman named Mrs. Park, who had worked for Jihoon's mother for 19 years. Jihoon watched the footage on his laptop in his office with the door closed. Then he picked up his phone and called his mother. She answered on the second ring, smooth and warm, her voice carrying the particular gentle authority she deployed with him when she knew something was coming. Jihoon, I've been calling. I know. A pause. How is the child? His name is Daniel. He's recovering. Good. That's good. Now, I need you to tell me, Jihoon said, what you said to Grace 7 years ago. Silence. Jihoon. I have the security footage. I have the bank records for Mr. Cha's secondary account. I have Mrs. Park's phone log from the night the DNA sample was tampered with. His voice was even. He had spent 40 minutes achieving that evenness. I'm not asking you whether you did it. I'm asking you to tell me what you said to her. More silence. When his mother spoke again, the gentled warmth had been replaced by something older and flatter. I protected you. You destroyed us. I preserved your career, your future, your families. You took my son from me. The evenness cracked for exactly 1 second. Then he rebuilt it. You took 7 years of my son's life. You took Grace's choice. You forged evidence to end a relationship between 2 people who had done nothing to deserve it. And then 7 years later, you tampered with a child's medical records. He paused. I want you to understand that I understand now who you are. Jihoon, if you would just listen. I have listened to you for 34 years. He was quiet for a moment. I won't be doing that anymore. He ended the call. The confrontation became public in the way things do in institutions where everyone knows each other, slowly at first and then all at once. An anonymous submission to the hospital ethics board. A journalist who had been investigating the Seo family's medical donations. The lab technician who had flagged the chain of custody irregularity making a formal statement. Jihoon gave a press statement at the hospital entrance on a Friday afternoon that was characteristically brief and characteristically precise. He acknowledged Daniel, acknowledged the circumstances, declined to detail the family conflict publicly, while making clear he intended to pursue legal accountability for the DNA tampering. He did not mention his mother by name. He didn't need to. The same evening, his mother sent his younger sister to the hospital with a message. The foundation's board was considering his resignation from the family's associated hospital positions. His inheritance, such as it was under review. The Seo family name would be protected at any cost. Ji-hoon's sister delivered this message with the expression of someone who had been drafted into a role she found deeply embarrassing. And Ji-hoon asked when she had finished. "And I think you should do whatever you're going to do," his sister said. "I have thought so for 20 minutes. I just needed to deliver the message first." She glanced toward room 412. "Does he look like you?" "Terrifyingly so." She nodded, satisfied. "Good." He told Grace that evening. She listened without interrupting, and when he finished she said, "You'll lose everything." "Not everything. Your family name. Your foundation positions. Potentially your." "Grace." He waited until she looked at him. "I spent 7 years building a career to fill the space where my life was supposed to be. I don't want to spend another 7 years doing the same thing." He paused. "If choosing you means losing things that were only ever compensation for not having you, that is not a difficult trade. You shouldn't have to choose." "I know. But I am choosing." His jaw was set, that expression she knew. The one that meant he had already decided and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. "I'm choosing you. Both of you. And I need to know. I am not asking you to decide anything right now. I am not asking you to." "Yes," Grace said. "I haven't asked a question yet. Whatever the question is." She looked at him steadily. "Yes." He exhaled and reached out and put his hand against her face the way he had 1,000 times 7 years ago, and she leaned into it, and the hospital moved around them. 12 days later, Daniel's condition changed overnight. Grace woke at 3 a.m. to monitors alarming and nurses moving fast, and a cold, absolute fear that she had believed, foolishly, dangerously, was behind her. The post-surgical complication was rare but documented. A secondary arrhythmia cascade triggered by the healing tissue, requiring immediate intervention. Daniel's oxygen levels dropped. His face went ashy in a way that Grace recognized and had never learned to face with anything but raw animal terror. "You have to call Dr. Seo," she told the attending physician, her voice steady because Daniel could hear her and she would not let him hear her shaking. "You have to call him now. Dr. Seo is the primary. Call him. Please. Call him now." Ji-hoon arrived in 9 minutes. He looked at Grace once when he came through the door. A single complete look that said, "I have him and do not fall apart yet and trust me," in the compressed language of two people who have loved each other long enough to communicate in glances. And then he turned to his son and became the surgeon. Grace sat outside the operating room for 5 hours and 20 minutes. She sat with her hands in her lap and her back straight, and she prayed every prayer she knew in English and Yoruba and pieces of Korean she had learned over 6 years. And she did not allow herself to imagine the alternative, because imagining it would make it possible, and she needed, with everything she was, for it to be impossible. Nurse Cho sat beside her for 2 hours without speaking. Ji-hoon's sister arrived at the 4th hour and sat on Grace's other side and also did not speak, which was exactly right. Nobody told her anything. The light stayed on. At the 5th hour, Grace pressed her hands flat on her knees and told herself, "He will come out of that room. Daniel will come out of that room. Ji-hoon will not let him go. He found his son 11 days ago and he will not let him go." The doors opened. Ji-hoon walked out. Grace stood up. His face was unreadable, the surgical mask still around his neck, his scrubs marked with the evidence of 5 hours of concentrated effort, his eyes finding her across the corridor with the immediate, specific focus that had always made her feel like the only person in any room. His face was wet. Grace's hands went to her mouth. She could not tell his expression was doing something complicated, something she needed more time to interpret, and she didn't have time. She needed to know right now. She needed. And then from somewhere down the corridor, small and hoarse and unmistakable, "Mom." The months that followed were not simple. Nothing real is simple. There were medical follow-ups, legal proceedings against Madame Seo, who engaged 3 lawyers and released 2 public statements that convinced no one. There were school enrollment conversations and custody documentation, and the particular exhaustion of administrative institutions encountering situations they didn't have pre-existing forms for. There was Daniel, who processed the information that Ji-hoon was his father with the characteristic Daniel method, asking 400 questions, going quiet for a day, and then resuming normal operations with the new information integrated so thoroughly that referring to Ji-hoon as dad became natural before any adult had made a formal decision about it. There was Ji-hoon learning how to be in a family the way some people learn surgery, with intensity and precision and the occasional stunning mistake that he would analyze afterward in clinical detail, and Grace gently explaining that parenting was not a discipline you could optimize, you just had to do it imperfectly and keep showing up. You keep showing up, she told him, on a night when he'd been too firm about a homework situation and Daniel had gone to bed stiff-backed and wounded and Ji-hoon had been standing in the kitchen for 20 minutes cataloging his failure. That's the whole job. You keep showing up. I upset him. He'll forgive you in the morning. That's also what children do. She put her hand on his arm. You're doing something harder than surgery. Give yourself time. He looked at her. How are you not angry at me still? He asked. I refused to treat him. In the emergency room. You saved him. She cut it off cleanly. You saved him. Whatever you felt for 30 seconds in an emergency room, you saved him. That is what I know about you. He was quiet for a moment. I need to apologize to you, he said. Not for the 30 seconds. For the years of believing you'd left for someone else. I had moments where I wondered. Where something didn't fit. And I chose anger instead of. Ji-hoon. She looked at him directly. Your mother showed you fabricated letters. You were 27 and grieving. I don't, she stopped. I spent 6 years being angry at myself for the choice I made. I don't have any anger left to give you. He looked at her for a long moment. I would like, he said carefully, to spend the rest of my life making sure you don't have to be angry at yourself either. A spring afternoon. The kind that soul saves apparently, for moments that require a proper backdrop. The park outside Hansung Medical Center was in full bloom. The cherry trees doing the annual spectacular thing. Petals drifting in a way that Daniel found scientifically interesting and aesthetically overwhelming in equal measure. Ji-hoon knelt. Not dramatically. Quietly, the way he did things that mattered, with deliberateness and without performance. Daniel stood beside him, solemn as a cathedral, holding a small box with both hands because Ji-hoon had trusted him with it and Daniel treated trust as the serious thing it was. Grace pressed her fingers to her mouth. I lost 7 years, Ji-hoon said. His voice was even and unhurried, the way it was when he was saying something he'd thought through to the bottom. I don't want to lose another day. Not one. He looked up at her. I am asking you, both of you, if you'll let me stay. Daniel held out the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Exactly what she would have chosen herself. She looked at Ji-hoon, kneeling in the cherry blossom light with his heart on his face for the first time in 7 years, asking for what they had always been supposed to be. Yes, Grace said. Daniel said, finally, with the profound relief of someone who had seen this coming for weeks and had been exercising considerable patience. Ji-hoon laughed. Actually laughed, the real one, the one Grace had spent 3 years earning the first time and had never forgotten. He stood up and put the ring on her finger and Daniel immediately inserted himself between them and wrapped his arms around both their waists with the confident assumption that this embrace was built for 3. Grace held her family. The petals fell. And 7 years of wrong turns and locked doors and choices made from love and fear and survival arrived, finally here. A park in Seoul in spring with the right people. They had always been the right people. They had just needed time. And one emergency room and one small boy who tilted his head exactly like his father, to find their way back. That's the end. And if this story moved you, if you cried, if you gasped, if you had to pause, that's exactly what Amade's Afro K Stories is built for. Subscribe, share this video with someone who needs a story today and come back, because the next one is already coming, and it hits even harder.